How did pink become a girly color? Although it's a relatively recent phenomenon, blue is for boys and pink is for girls is one of those rules that we all grew up hearing. But have you ever wondered why this custom exists? With pink becoming a symbol for femininity, depicted in both a positive and negative light, it's a color that follows women from infancy into adulthood. You could also see society's treatment of pink as a metaphor for the female experience and existence as a whole. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the rise of gendered clothing, the end of neutral colors, and the feminization and demonization of pink. Let's get into it. Throughout the 19th century, it was common for children of any gender to wear practical white dresses up until the age of 6, with even President Franklin D. Roosevelt sporting the look as a toddler. The style of the garment, as well as its color, were considered gender neutral at the time, and because of recent technological advances, they were also practical, with white cloth being able to be frequently washed and bleached without fear of ruining the garment. While white clothing had once been an indication of wealth, the Industrial Revolution had made it far more affordable and accessible, so in order for upper-class families to distance themselves from the general populace, they began to introduce pastels to their children's wardrobes, with the colors being a sign that they had the time and money necessary for the garment's upkeep. Because the Victorian era was all about etiquette, rules in regard to what colors were appropriate for children were eventually published, with an 1890 issue of the Ladies' Home Journal saying, quote, "Pure white is for all babies, blue for girls and pink for boys when a color is wished," the exact opposite of what is customary today. At the turn of the 20th century, little boys began to wear the white dresses of previous years for shorter and shorter periods of time, with Vogue outlining in an issue from 1900 that they should begin segueing out of long dresses at 6 months, short dresses at age 3, then wear knickers or shorts until they were old enough to manage trousers. Around the same time period, Harper's Bazaar noted that boys were usually put into trousers as soon as they were too old for baby frocks, which was about the age of 3. By the 1910s, the vast majority of people had accepted that dresses were no longer fashionable for young boys, but the colors associated with gender had yet to be set in stone, and this lack of consistency was a cause for confusion for many, including the media. In an article published in 1918 by Earnshaw's Infants Department, quote, "The generally accepted rule is pink for the boys and blue for the girls. The reason is that pink, being a more decided and stronger color, is more suitable for the boy, while blue, which is more delicate and dainty, is prettier for the girl." The reasoning behind this line of thinking goes all the way back to the 18th century, when pink was considered a masculine color as it was a paler shade of red, which was then associated with Mars, the Roman god of war. European aristocrats, both men and women, wore the color as a symbol of luxury, elegance, and beauty, and for all intents and purposes it became known as a genderless color amongst adults. Madame de Pompadour, the chief mistress of Louis XV, loved the color so much that in 1757 the French porcelain manufacturer Sèvres named its new shade of pink Rose Pompadour in honor of her. These delicate shades of pink were immortalized in art, where it developed an association with youth and romance, but crucially, not femininity. This continued into the 1800s, when pink represented innocence and delicacy, attributes that aren't inherently feminine. Pink's history as a masculine color wasn't widely known to the 20th century public, and in 1920, the Evening Sun contradicted the idea in a response to a concerned reader. Quote, "Pink is for girl babies, blue is for boys. You can remember this because boy and blue both begin with the letter B." An article in 1928 by the Independent Record chose to not pick a side in the color war, instead saying, quote, "In the North, blue is used for baby girls and pink for baby boys. In the South, the order is reversed, pink for girls and blue for boys." This debate continued for some time, with the Birmingham News publishing in 1938, quote, "Shall they be pink or blue? Ah, burning question. Pink for girls and blue for boys, blue for girls or pink for boys. A never-ending controversy rages about this problem. Go to one store and the manager of the infants department will tell you pink is for boys. At another shop, pink is for girls." Although people in the West had been arguing about blue or pink for babies for decades, adult men and women were still wearing both colors interchangeably. But as white-collar work became more predominant in the 1930s, which required suits and ties, adult men began wearing darker colors more frequently. And as if to contrast this, women opted for brighter hues and pastel tints. As you've probably noticed, we've only mentioned lighter shades of pink thus far, and for good reason. In 1937, shocking pink hit the fashion scene, a vibrant magenta that was formulated by popular Italian designer Elsa Schiaparelli. The bright shade soon became synonymous with the brand, and was the designer's calling card. After the world was thrown into war, Schiaparelli continued to use shocking pink in her designs, despite more somber colors being popular, which was later interpreted as a form of escapism. As advertising strategies became more complex, red, and everything that fell under it, was deemed a romantic color, and manufacturers in New York, Boston, and Chicago settled on reassigning pink to goods aimed at girls and women as it was a sweeter version of red. The decision caught on so quickly that by 1947 it had trickled into mainstream clothing trends, and with popular designers like Christian Dior heavily promoting the color, pink became a staple of post-war era fashion. With casual clothing becoming more common, menswear companies began seeing a rise in female shoppers, with Brooks Brothers reporting that their men's pink Oxford shirt was impossible to keep stocked in its smallest sizes. To keep up with demand, Brooks Brothers created a version of the shirt that was tailored for women, which debuted in 1949. Photographed for Vogue that August, the pink shirt immediately sold out upon the magazine's publication, and the popularity of this item was later credited by Life magazine in 1955 for making pink acceptable amongst grown men, saying, quote, "The color that women have traditionally appropriated from babyhood has taken a turn in the other direction." Across the US, a pink peak in male clothing has been reached as manufacturers have saturated more and more of their output with the pretty pastel. Now more of a staple than a luxury, the color is even acceptable to teenage boys. Although I would like to point out that there was some backlash to this trend as well, with an article from 1954 lamenting the sudden rise of pink amongst men. Quote, "Girls remember it used to be pink for girls and blue for boys, but now the he-men are robbing us of that dainty feminine color." Doesn't that sound exactly like something a Fox News reporter would say today? In the 1950s, the color became further associated with femininity after it was routinely spotted on some of the most famous women of the time period. First Lady Mamie Eisenhower frequently wore pastel pink gowns to various high-profile events, and then proceeded to decorate the White House with so much pink that the press began referring to it as the Pink Palace. Her penchant for pink caught middle-class America's eye, and throughout the 1950s, housewives all over the country began introducing Mamie Pink into their homes, especially bathrooms and kitchens, with Electrical Merchandising magazine saying in 1958, quote, "If forced to pick one color as leading this year, most industry men say pink is tops." Actress Jane Mansfield was a prime example of this interior design trend, with her Los Angeles home being painted pink inside and out, along with other romantic motifs like hearts and cupids that matched her flamboyant image. While Mamie had helped pastel pink develop a sophisticated and elegant reputation, brighter hues were seen as sensual and flirtatious, in large part because of Marilyn Monroe and other bombshells of the time period. In 1953's Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Marilyn famously wore a hot pink gown in the film's best-remembered number, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, and she would wear similarly colored dresses over the course of her career. Hot pink eventually became associated with Marilyn Monroe herself, and as the most popular sex symbol of the era, this shade of pink developed a similar sexual connotation. Just to provide some further perspective on how differently the two shades were perceived by the public and the media, Audrey Hepburn exclusively wore pastel pink throughout her career, except in 1961's Breakfast at Tiffany's, where she played a call girl. What a coincidence. While pink-blue gender coding for children had popped up since the late 1800s, it wasn't until the 1980s that a decision was finally made on the matter, which was spurred on by the discovery of prenatal testing, which could reveal the sex of an unborn baby. Because parents no longer had to wait 9 months to figure out if they were having a boy or a girl, retailers began embracing the popular pink is for girls and blue is for boys narrative in order to sell color-coded outfits, decor, home furnishings, and toys. With store shelves constantly being stocked with these opposing colors, and this generation growing up surrounded by women who famously wore pink, the acceptance of these gendered colors as tradition was inevitable. I also think that it's interesting to note that back in 1948, the Detroit Free Press published an article on a blood test conducted by a young technician named George Talbot. In it, Talbot is credited for finding that, quote, "If a smear from the mother's cervix turned blue, a boy was probable. If pink, a girl. Yep, pink is for girls because science said so." In the late 80s and into the 90s, the toy market found success in manufacturing different sets of products, one for boys and one for girls, in order to satiate the continually growing trend of gender marketing. Products aimed at little girls would often have pink packaging and other sweet motifs like stars, hearts, flowers, and butterflies, whereas toys aimed at boys would be blue or red, and include more masculine imagery like sports or cars. Because of this, pink became associated with a more traditional form of femininity, and with baby dolls, dollhouses, and fake kitchen appliances being popular girls' toys during this era, pink was tied to domesticity.
We've been down this aisle already.
We've never been down this aisle, it's pink!
We also can't ignore Barbie's impact on the color's popularity with young girls. Although her debut in the 1950s was meant to be more high fashion and featured various looks, pink was officially chosen as her primary color in the 1970s, and has been synonymous with the brand ever since. While the 1980s marked the rise and acceptance of gendered colors for children, it almost had the opposite effect on adults, with pink making a major comeback in the mainstream due to a 1950s retro revival. As I've said on this channel dozens of times before, pastel pink was one of the biggest colors of the decade, with pastel pink dresses, jeans, eyeshadow, and lipstick being all the rage. It was especially popular for weddings and prom, events that are considered a feminine interest. While the color is often associated with women, like Molly Ringwald or Princess Diana, men wore more pink in the 80s than they had in decades. We'd seen a few famous men sport pink previously, like Elvis Presley and Sean Connery, but in the 80s it was on another level, in large part due to the rise of preppy style, which embraced pastel colors wholeheartedly. Similar to the 1950s, hot pink was seen as more edgy and sexual than its lighter counterpart, with artist and media personality Angeline famously incorporating the bold color into her suggestive image as a tongue-in-cheek ode to blonde bombshells of the past. She was publicly lambasted because of this bimbo character, with one article in 1990 saying, quote, "There is a sad, desperate quality to the woman who calls herself Angeline, like a clown still performing long after the circus has closed." And as a result, the hot pink hues that she often wore developed a negative connotation, being perceived as a sign that a woman was dumb, provocative, and attention-seeking. With so many industries pushing the idea that pink is for girls, parents felt pressured to obey this new rule, and abiding by these gendered colors no longer felt optional. According to Professor Joe Pauletti, who has spent nearly 40 years researching and writing about gender differences in American fashion, quote, "What was once a matter of practicality, you dress your baby in white dresses and diapers, white cotton can be bleached, became a matter of, oh my god, if I dress my baby in the wrong thing, they'll grow up perverted." Because yes, people really did think that if you dressed a boy up in pink, it'd do irreparable damage to his psyche. 40 years of associating pink primarily with women instead of men had taken its toll, and in the late 90s we began to see pink more and more frequently in film and television, with the color often being reserved for female villains, with the character often being narcissistic, frivolous, superficial, promiscuous, and unintelligent. Now, I'm not defending all of these characters, but isn't it interesting how Sharpay, Regina, and Fiona all wear pink while exhibiting many of the same traits? In some cases, like 2001's Legally Blonde, the main character's primarily pink color palette was a subversion of audience expectations, with Elle Woods being smart and hardworking despite her hyper-feminine appearance. In other instances, like 1997's Romy and Michelle's high school reunion or 2008's The House Bunny, these pink protagonists still exhibited these stereotypically negative characteristics, but they were framed in a positive light. Reality shows like The Simple Life, The Anna and Nicole Show, and The Girls Next Door inadvertently reinforced the public's already negative perception of the color, as it was often worn by the series' controversial stars, both on and off camera. Even in the music industry, pink was depicted negatively, with the video for the song Nasty Girl by Destiny's Child being a prime example. Because pink had such a negative connotation during this time period, many young women wound up rejecting the color and the attributes associated with it, leading to the rise of the not like other girls girl. During the late 2000s, gender reveal parties emerged, where soon-to-be parents could reveal their baby's sex, incorrectly worded as gender, in front of friends and family. This reveal would include blue or pink decorations, which indicated to guests whether the child was a boy or a girl. If parents were unsure what their future child's sex was, pastel yellow would be used as a placeholder. I find this choice rather funny, considering we'd already spent several centuries with white as a neutral baby color, but I digress. As social media has grown, these reveals have become increasingly elaborate, with some parents no longer believing that a cupcake is enough of a surprise, and feeling the need to go viral. With at least 2 gender reveal parties inadvertently leading to forest fires in the state of California, I find it rather silly to be putting others at risk for something that honestly isn't that important. Not to mention that these parties also reinforce gender stereotypes and exclude non-binary people. In recent years, women have thrown the pink is for girls notion back in men's faces with the phrase, real men wear pink, which essentially challenges patriarchal views about gender and preconceived ideas about masculinity. As a result, we've begun to see various shades of pink make their way back into men's wardrobes, which I'm hoping is a sign that in the future the color will no longer be associated with one gender nor hold any negative connotations. While some women's relationship with pink is complicated, and for good reason, we've begun to see a reclamation of the color due to the 2000s revival and the rise of the bimbo core and Barbie core aesthetics. The resurgence of pink in women's wardrobes has been interpreted as an act of rebellion and liberation, with people wholeheartedly embracing the stereotypes about femininity that were once demonized, as a way of dismantling the sexist views people have had of it. Considering pink was never tied to any gender for the vast majority of the color's existence, I think it's about time that we made it neutral once again. So, the next time someone tells you they're having a boy, don't be afraid to give them a pink binky. What are your thoughts on the color pink? I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!